Thank you very much, Sapna, for introducing me and welcoming all the audience. So thank you very much, all the audience, for joining on time, and few of them have joined before time also. So that means that what Bobby G wants us to do is by doing good, you are being good, or something like that, or doing well by doing good. That is what his punchline is, which is much more attractive. And today's subject, what Bobby G is going to present it to us, is social entrepreneurship. It is a fantastic word, social entrepreneurship. So, two things clubbing together by doing good and keeping good is what he's going to share with us. And we all know he is a well known person in his own field. He has been contributing a lot at his own level. However, Ahmedabad Management Association is privileged to have, honored to have him as a speaker, especially joining online, giving his valuable time. So, we are thankful to you, Bobby. Let me introduce Bobbyji formally. His experience. Wow, what can I speak much more about it? Bobbyji is, his full name is Bobby Achettu, and he's founder and CEO of Accelerated Growth AG, a Chicago-based management consulting firm with more than 100 team members and offices in the US and India. AG has partnered with 300 companies in the entrepreneurial space, from the venture arms of Fortune 500 organizations to VC and PE-backed entities, privately held business. He is also the director on four corporate boards of the companies ranging in the size of a million, 3 million to 50 million revenue. And he sits on the non-profit boards, including as a co-chair of employer advisory board within Northwestern University and Science. He has been into the entrepreneurial organization Chicago. Bobby G is also an wow, he is also a professor at Northwestern University and Loyola University, where he is teaching highly rated courses on evaluation of modern business and social entrepreneurship. So Ahmedabad Management Association proudly welcomes you, and it is our honor that you are here with us to share your experience, your ideas, your experience, and I'm sure we all will be having more insights and more knowledge after we learn from you something for next 45, 50 minutes or 1 hour, whatever you take. So welcome once again all the audience who are here joining online, and let us learn something. Let us be good, do good, and learn the journey of Bobbyji for social entrepreneurship. Over to you, Bobbyji.
Thank you, Mr. Dixit. I really appreciate being part of this conversation. I really appreciate the introduction. And before I begin, I did want to say I had the opportunity to speak to your team over the course of the last several weeks. And I wanted to just share with you how impressed I've been with your organization. I was first told about AMA by one of my colleagues, Manan, and he shared with me the vision. But as your team articulated to me, I really truly see the value that you're able to provide to your community. I'm a true believer in the gap between academia and corporate and bringing knowledge together. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for everything your team does. And thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be here, although I will admit I'm extremely disappointed. My plan was to be in person, to meet all of you in person. There's no simulation that could be had that replaces being in person. But unfortunately for today, this is the best we can do. I was thinking about what to talk about today on this topic of social entrepreneurship. Doing well by doing good. It's a phrase that's been around for hundreds of years. And I thought there's several different ways to approach this discussion today. I could frame it with the academic components, of which I've taught for many years, on entrepreneurship and social good, or I can really focus on my own personal experience. What I've decided to do today is combine the two. So the presentation I put together will give you some frameworks that I've seen and learned over the last several years, but in addition, it will also focus on my personal journey and the reason social entrepreneurship is so important to me. So with that, I'll spend the next 20 minutes or so going through a handful of slides. What I encourage all of you to do, and for those of you that are on my team, you know how important questions are for me. I would really encourage you to jot down questions. In fact, if you're so passionate about a question, please interrupt me, no problem. I have no problem stopping my presentation and answering questions. But I ask you to, as I go through this presentation, think about the things that resonate with you, think about the things that you disagree with, and let's have a conversation about it. That is the best part of any dialogue that I participate in, is that level of conversation and learning that we can have from each other. So that's my only ask for today, is that at the end of my presentation or throughout my presentation, if you have questions, please raise your hand and let's dig in. So I want to start, and Mr. Dixit, you primed me perfectly as it related to this topic. So social entrepreneurship, doing well by doing good. So for some of you, you know that this is Benjamin Franklin. If you've studied American history, you may know that. Benjamin Franklin came up with the term do well by doing good 250 years ago. But the concept of building organizations that have a broader purpose than just financial benefit has been around for thousands of years. And what I wanted to do was start thinking about this concept of social entrepreneur. There's two individuals that are really well known in the entrepreneurial world related to this topic of social entrepreneur. So Bill Drayton, who's the founder of Ashoka, and then many of us are aware of Muhammad Yunus from Grameen Bank. So these are two individuals that have gotten accolades for many, many years around building the structures and framework around social entrepreneurship. So as we know, Muhammad Yunus really focused on the areas of micro lending and how to create opportunities for those underprivileged individuals, many of whom are women, that had no access to capital, by lending sometimes $5, $10 for individuals to build businesses and create opportunities, not just for themselves, but for their families and their communities. So these are just two examples of many, many individuals that have had tremendous impact on the entrepreneurial world by focusing on creating a vision that has much more to do than just profit. What I wanted to do today is break this word, break this phrase into two separate words, social and entrepreneur. And so in order to do that, I thought I would tell you my personal story. So what does it mean to be entrepreneurial? I think that's a common misconception in not just the entrepreneurial world, but also in corporate organizations. Do you have to start a company? Do you have to invent something new? Do you have to have employees? And my premise, my belief, is you don't have to do any of those things. Being entrepreneurial is about freedom of thought. It's the ability to come up with ideas and to think about things in a different way. That could be done if you're sitting in a room by yourself. That could be done if you're working within a Fortune 500 organization. And that could be done if you're starting a company from scratch. And so where did I get this concept of freedom of thought? And so I'm going to go all the way back to 42 years ago. These are my parents, Skaria and Mary Achettu. They immigrated from Kerala to the United States when I was 4 years old. So they got on a plane and they went all the way to Chicago. Now, what's interesting is my dad was in his early 30s, and he actually had a really great job in India. He was an engineer, a qualified engineer. And here he is. This is one of my favorite pictures of him. He actually was working for a company, an engineering firm, where he and some colleagues got sent to Switzerland. So he bought the best soup and he went out there with 6 of his colleagues and learned a tremendous amount, right? So he had a great job in India, and he decided through substantial risk to bring his family to the United States. And so when you think about the concept of entrepreneurship, you think about freedom of thought, you think about managing and mitigating risk for creation of opportunities. My dad never started his own company. In fact, when he came to the United States, because at that time, a degree from India, this is 42 years ago. At that time, a degree from India did not mean a lot in the United States. So though he is a qualified engineer, he started his first job was sweeping floors in a factory, and he worked his way up within that organization. He never started a company. He never came up with a brand new idea that went on to make millions and billions of dollars. But nobody can tell me what he did wasn't entrepreneurial. In fact, in my mind, he is the most entrepreneurial person I know. So remember, let's take this phrase social entrepreneur. And the thing I want you to focus on is, in order to be a social entrepreneur, in order to be socially entrepreneurial, you don't have to be running your own company or start your own company. It's about freedom of thought. Just like when my father got on that plane with my mother to come to the United States to create opportunities for myself and my siblings, he was entrepreneurial, and no one can deny that. So I'll segue on to then my corporate career. So as a child of immigrants, one of the most important things that my parents wanted for me was education and stability. They had left India for opportunities for their children, and so they wanted stability and education for me, and so that's what I did. I graduated from DePaul University and went to work at a large corporate organization. The first company I worked for had 20,000 employees, and I eventually worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers, which at the time had about 200,000 employees. And the way I describe my corporate career is that I spent a dozen years in these huge global organizations. So this is what I felt like. And if you see the slides, that's not literally me, but that's what I felt like. I was in a sea of people. And though very candidly, I enjoyed the time I spent at these large corporate organizations, I did not feel like I was having an impact because these organizations were too big. There was no freedom of thought. I wasn't able to be myself. I worked within so many different parameters. And so that's when I made my first leap into the entrepreneurial world. I joined a private equity firm, and I was very fortunate. At the time, I was a senior manager at PwC, one of the largest professional services firms in the world, in a very prestigious role where my last project, I had 60 people that were working for me. I joined a private equity firm where I was employee number 6. It was a very different environment. I went from a huge office at a multinational global organization to a 6-person firm. And as I reflect back as to why I made that decision, it was the first time I was working at a small company. As I reflect back as to why I made that decision, there was one reason and one reason alone that I made this entrepreneurial leap. And I wish I could say it was a better reason, but it was for money. Number one reason. Here I was, a senior manager at PricewaterhouseCoopers, highly compensated. And this role provided me an opportunity at this private equity firm to get a 40% base salary increase and the opportunity to then make 100% of my salary in bonus. So if you do the math, there was a scenario where I can triple my total compensation in the course of 1 year if all went well. So when I was looking to leave PwC, all I saw were dollar signs. In fact, I didn't know that much about private equity. I didn't know much about the entrepreneurial world, but what I did know is here's a great opportunity to make money. So for those of you on the call that are a little further along in your career, I think you know how this story ends. I think you know how this story ends, and your guess is right. So what was my result? So I had also, in addition to this salary increase, I had the opportunity to invest some of my own money into this private equity fund. As most of you are aware, private equity, the approach and business model is private equity firms raise capital and deploy that capital into growing organizations in order to secure a return on investment for their investors. And so I had the opportunity to invest $200,000 into this fund, which at the time was a good part of my savings. I had spent a dozen years in a large corporate organization, and my wife and I had put aside money, and so we invested $200,000 into this company. Well, in a period of 8 months, I lost $130,000. I was getting paid by the firm and all those types of things. But it was my first major career failure. Remember, my parents had taken the substantial risk. They had the entrepreneurial spirit to leave the creature comforts of home in India, in Kottayam, and they came to the United States with literally nothing, traditional immigrant story. And they came specifically to create opportunities for myself, my brother, and my sister. And I spent the last dozen years, 12 years of my career working up the corporate ladder. And I thought this was going to be my next big step in my career and to make a lot of money. And within an 8-month period, I lost $130,000 and I had my first major career failure. I was beside myself. I had no idea what to do. Now, fortunately, I was still employed by this organization, and I had the opportunity of time to think about what I wanted to do as the next step in my career. And what did I realize? So the first thing I realized is vision alignment matters more than financial goals. Vision alignment matters more than financial goals. Failure is one of the keys to success. 1 second, I'm sorry. So I have to introduce you to someone. This is my little niece. Ayla, can you say hello? So Ayla is just saying goodbye to me for school. So have a great day, okay, sweetie? Thank you. Bye now. Sorry about that. She would not stop knocking on the door, and I thought it was actually her father. So I'm actually in Memphis, Tennessee, visiting a colleague of mine, and so apologies for that. But she doesn't take no for an answer, but I know she appreciated seeing you all. That may be the first 5-year-old that presented at a AMA session. Am I correct in that? Is that history in the making, maybe? Yes, good, excellent. So there was so much that I learned in this experience, right? Vision alignment matters more than financial goals. Failure is one of the keys to success, and nothing turns out as planned. So let's rewind and let's refresh. So when you think about social entrepreneurship, and you think about what makes an entrepreneur, it's about freedom of thought, okay? The second thing I want you to focus on is vision alignment. I went into an organization specifically to make as much money as possible. I wasn't focused on the vision and mission of that organization. I was focused on making money. And guess what happened? Is I didn't make money. And by all practical purposes, financially and career-wise, I failed. But a key takeaway is that failure then led to where I'm at today. And so where is that? I want to share with you a philosophy that through my experiences, through my failures, that I developed that has now become a core of my organization, Accelerated Growth. And I share this because one of the most important things about social entrepreneurship is that there needs to be a core philosophy, a core vision that's broader than just profit. So at my organization, this is the concept of 95-5. And the concept of 95-5 was one I'd read about years ago. I started teaching at Northwestern about 6 years ago. And as I was developing my curriculum, the course that I taught on and continue to teach on is around the evolution of modern business. So what we talk and do research around is how organizations are changing, not just over the course of the last 5-10 years, but how they've changed over the last several hundred years, and how corporate culture is changing. So through these readings, I came across a humanistic psychologist named Dr. Carl Rogers. And for those of you that have studied psychology, you may have heard of Dr. Carl Rogers. And so Dr. Carl Rogers talks about the concept of real self and ideal self. So real self is who you are deep down inside, and ideal self is who you aspire to be. And so as I was reading Dr. Carl Rogers' philosophies, what I realized is over the course of my career, I've had the opportunity to meet with literally over 1,000 successful investors, entrepreneurs, board members, academics, government officials. I've just been really fortunate over the last 25 years to have met some incredible people. And what I realized as I read the philosophies of Dr. Carl Rogers is the most successful people I know have the ability to be their real self the vast majority of time. And so I took Dr. Carl Rogers' philosophy and created a framework. So early on in people's careers, and if you all reflect back, if you just take a second, in fact, if you can do me a favor, everyone on this call, just take a second and close your eyes for a second. Just bear with me, close your eyes, and think back to your first job. If you're like me, that was 25 years ago. In fact, my first job was more like 35 years ago. I was working at the local junior high, helping the janitors clean up. That was my first job when I was about 15 years old. But think back to your first job and think about that first day on the job when you got to work. Were you the same person that all your friends and family knew you as? I doubt it. I doubt it, because if you were anything like me, and you can open your eyes, by the way, if you're anything like me, you went into that role unsure of yourself, lacking confidence. And you went into that role knowing that you had to and should operate within their parameters and structure. But if you're like most leaders, as you evolve in your career, and in this case, this is a manager, right? To use a framework of titles, as you evolve in your career, you get more aligned with your real self. To the point where I am today, we define it internally as 95-5. I'm 95% my real self, 5% my work self, my ideal self. So again, what is real self and what's ideal self? Real self is who you are today. Ideal self is who you aspire to be. And what I've seen is the vast majority of those individuals that have achieved success in business and leadership, and define success however you want. I define it as happiness, but you may define it as money, prestige, title, role, whatever. The vast majority of people that I've worked with in my career that have achieved real success are most closely aligned to 95-5. 95% real self, 5% ideal and aspirational self. That's at the heart of the accelerated growth organization. And I say this because as I tell you more about my journey to social entrepreneurship, I share with you again, in order to be a company that embraces the tenets of social entrepreneurship, you have to have a vision and a mission and a purpose that is beyond profit. So here we are. As Mr. Dixit mentioned, we're over 100 people globally, about 50 people in India and about 60 people in the US. The first 3 or 4 years of the Accelerated Growth Organization, it was just me and a couple independent contractors. It wasn't really a business. It was something I was very passionate about. I was very fortunate. In my first few clients were hyper growth companies that kept me very, very busy. And so over the last 7 or 8 years, we've grown as an organization. And specifically, thanks to the leadership of Manan and Trini and several other key folks in the organization, we've grown our India operations over the last couple of years to 50 people. And we will continue to grow in Ahmedabad. We have significant targets for growth within India and specifically within Ahmedabad. We have 5 primary service offerings. Our focus in about 75% of the work that we do is around finance and accounting. We also have a technology practice that focuses on data analytics, system selection, and then a training and development vertical, as well as a board advisory vertical. As Mr. Dixit mentioned, we've worked with over 300 companies. And so I mention all of this because when I started this organization, the focus and the core of this organization was really about self-actualization. And that focus on self-actualization for myself is what has led to our growth. So I say this because the research is extremely conclusive. The organizations that have a core focus and vision that are beyond profit, statistically speaking, will do better financially, operationally, and from a growth perspective. But something was missing as I built this organization. There was something that was bothering me. And I reflect back, and for those of you that are aware of accelerated growth, and for those of you on the team that may be participating today, you know that there's a concept in our organization that we call the 95-5 meeting. So these are meetings that I have with groups of folks or individuals. And in fact, I had a series of these planned when I came to India, or when I was planning to come to India. But these are meetings I have with the team to just get to know the team. So sometimes they're done one-on-one, and other times they're done with 3 or 4 people. And we just talk about various different topics. And it's my opportunity to get to know the team. And frankly, the reality is most of the best ideas in our organization have come from our team. So I'm excited and engaged whenever I talk to our team. And I remember a conversation I had several years ago with one of our managers in the US. Her name was Brittany. And I was sitting down with Brittany, and she was just loving what she was doing at the firm. The opportunity to work with incredible entrepreneurial organizations and to be part of a high growth entrepreneurial organization ourselves. We've been on the Inc. 5000 list, one of the fastest growing companies in the United States for the last 3 years. We will achieve that list again next year. So there's this scenario where you're working with incredible companies and incredible clients, and you're working with a great group of people as well. And so that's the culture we've built at the firm. And so Brittany was very happy, but she said something to me that ended up changing the course of how I looked at my organization and what I wanted to do with my life. And what she said to me is, Bobby, I love what I do. It's so much fun. I'm so engaged at work. But ultimately, all we're doing is making millionaires, multimillionaires. And I'm going to say that again. She said, all we're doing is making millionaires, multimillionaires. And that was shocking to me. So when I first heard it, I said, oh, Brittany, what do you mean? And she made a great point. She said, listen, our average client does 15 to 20 million in revenue, which means the enterprise value of that organization is certainly many multiples of $1 million. We've worked with organizations that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And part of our premise as an organization is we help build the infrastructure and we execute on finance, accounting, technology initiatives that will help companies grow. So what she was calling out was just a fact of what we're doing. We increase the enterprise value of companies and we make them larger, and therefore we create value for shareholders and investors and leaders, right? But as she dissected our vision and mission and everything we do into that one sentence, it struck me as I wanted to make sure that we were doing more than that. I wanted to make sure that as we grow as an organization, that we contribute to society in a much broader way than just working with our clients. The other thing over the last few years that I've been very focused on and thinking on, and especially as COVID has hit us the last several years, is the refocus on some of the struggles the world is going through. Climate change. I could tell you in Chicago, our winters and summers are more extreme than I've ever seen. Just a couple of years ago, we had 18, 19 inches of snow on one day, and some of the coldest days I've ever experienced in 42 years of living in Chicago. And I know in India, the temperature shifts and dynamic have been extreme. The monsoon seasons and the timings and all those types of things are evolving and changing, right? Though years ago there were deniers of climate change, now the data and the information out there is unrefutable. Climate change is happening. Income inequality. The Wall Street Journal did a study, and this was accelerated by COVID. The Wall Street Journal did a study that between the start of COVID and today, for those individuals with a net worth in the US over $2 million, their net worth increased on average by 37%. Think about that. The rich are getting richer, and in the United States, inflation is really pushing forward hard. Inflation destroys the income of lower income individuals and the net worth build capability of these lower income individuals. So the disparity is growing. And the same issues are prevalent in India as well. Social unrest. For those of you that have been following in the US, this has been going on for many, many years, but it especially has been a focal point over the last 2 years with COVID. Police brutality and the culture of alienating people of color in the United States. That continues. So all these things are being brought together, and I think about as an organization what our responsibility is beyond just making a profit and working with our clients and making sure that we execute on our deliverables. And again, this is something that has been on my mind for many, many years. When my dad came to the United States, we literally had nothing. And when my wife and I got married, we literally had nothing. And I'd always told myself, at the point that we grow something and we have something, we want to give back. There's a couple other trends that are happening in the entrepreneurial world that are important to mention. The concept of the responsible entrepreneur. For all the reasons I mentioned, it's critical that the leaders of entrepreneurial organizations and corporates be thinking from the lens of not just their own personal satisfaction or their own personal success. They need to be thinking much broader along the lines of what their impact is to their community, for all the reasons I mentioned. The other thing that's become increasingly clear is that Generation Z, so that's roughly the individuals that are between the ages of 18 to 35. Generation Z is a generation that puts purpose over profit. There's a Fast Company survey that talks about the fact that 80% of those in Generation Z have a desire to work for organizations that have a broader goal than profit and that have an impact on their community. And in fact, 70% of Generation Z is willing to consider taking a lower salary in order to work for such an organization. These are incredible numbers that I can tell you weren't necessarily true in my generation. And so what does this all lead to? One of the things that I had been working on and thinking about executing for many years was the concept of having a nonprofit within our accelerated growth platform. And so we had started the initiative around this nonprofit called AG360 several years ago. In fact, there's a few of you from our team, from the accelerated growth team on this call that are well aware of the vision of AG360. And so that vision is to empower youth through education and financial literacy and women empowerment. And the goal has been to start in India and then move to Africa and then come to the United States, with the goal of eventually impacting the lives of 1 million underprivileged youth. And ultimately, when you think about the concept of 95-5 and self-actualization, and you think about real self and ideal self at the core of the accelerated growth organization, you think about my personal experiences working with over 1,000 extremely successful leaders and entrepreneurs and investors, and you think about what's happening in today's world, the fact that it is so imperative, mandatory, in order for a company to grow and sustain itself, that these organizations really focus on their impact on their community. I encourage every single one of you to think about the fact that you don't have to be an entrepreneur to come up with social initiatives. You don't have to be an entrepreneur to impact your community. You can work at an organization that has a social mission. You can come up with ideas and concepts that you evolve and you bring to the table at these organizations, because ultimately the data is out there. Those organizations that have a social focus are able to recruit better, they're more profitable, and they grow faster. So thank you everyone for your time today. Hopefully today I was able to share some new information and an enlightening perspective. But as I said at the start of this presentation, for me, the best parts of these discussions are the Q&A. So with that, I would love to open it up to any questions you all may have.
So let us wind up the session. Thank you very much, Mr. Bobby, for joining us, sparing your valuable time. Ahmedabad Management Association is highly obliged, and we would be seeking your sessions for new subjects or same subject with some more additional information and experience. I hope our audience has enjoyed, and our audience is requested to stay tuned on our Ahmedabad Management Association social media, as well as upcoming programs on website, and stay connected with Ahmedabad Management Association. Thank you very much, team AMA. Thank you very much, team Mr. Bobby, and thank you very much once again, Mr. Bobby, for joining us. Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Bobby.
everyone.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, everyone. Thanks, Bobby.
Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, AMA.
Thank you,
Bobby
Bobby.
sir,